Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Dr. Jeff May, and you guys don't need any introduction to me. You guys see my face plenty, and another face that you should be seeing plenty of is the gentleman that I have with me here today, Dr. Scott Jensen, who is in the running for a pretty cool thing. Governor of Minnesota. Who knew a kid from Nebraska would be interviewing the future governor in my heart? For sure. I'm gonna put that out there. But Dr. Scott, thank you for joining me today on Doctor's Orders, advice you should actually take. I figured you'd like the name of the podcast.
I do like the name of the podcast, but when you say doctor's orders, it makes me a titch nervous because I think there's an awful lot of patients out there who are saying, I'm sort of tired of doctor's orders. I would like the doctor's advocacy, and I would like it to be dependable, reliable, because so many people these days, Jeff, they're feeling abandoned.
Oh, tell me about it.
They're feeling betrayed. And it's not because they did anything wrong. In most situations, it's because they wanted to have a conversation that frequently their doctor, hospital, clinic, or insurance company felt was out of bounds. And that's the problem.
Yeah, let's get into this because this is exactly why. So even in our health center, now that we've expanded a few things, doing different things, but a conversation keeps coming up that breaks my heart. And being in practice for 14 years, I know you've probably, I don't know, how many years have you been in practice?
Well, I got my medical degree in 1981. So it's been 40 years since I got my medical degree, and I did a 3-year residency. So arguably, I guess 37 or something like that.
Congratulations. Well, just for fun, Scott, I turned 40 this year. So I was an 82 baby.
Ouch.
Yeah. I love
Well, maybe I delivered you.
Well, I was in Nebraska, so I know you didn't, but
yeah, the weekend you were born, I think I was not in Nebraska. You're right.
That's right. So I just wanted to see your reaction to that one, but that's okay. Wisdom, right? Wisdom. But when we look at this, these patients will ask me, I've had anything from, hey, my job, I feel literally my job's in jeopardy. I'm holding on by a thread because my employer is going to want to mandate me getting vaccinated. And a lot of times they'll be like, well, I've had it, or they just don't want to get it. Right. Or the fact of the matter is there's so much divide right now that they're feeling ousted within their business community. And these are jobs they've held for 20, 30, 35 years. So what would you suggest saying to a patient like that?
Well, this is a really dicey time for a patient, because if a patient makes a decision to try to find another physician or another clinic, frequently they're finding that many clinics are not accepting new patients. So there's been rules and regulations put down so that magic, which I have felt in my career, of having a patient see a physician and see that physician absolutely willing to advocate for the patient, that advocacy triggers in the patient a willingness to trust. So you get this advocacy and trust spiraling like that. That's what you want. That's what's not happening. If you want to interrupt that cycle of physicians advocating and patients trusting, the best thing to do is have physicians betraying them, ordering them around, demeaning their suggestions or their questions. And that's what's happening. So I think patients have to sort of press pause a little bit and recognize that this moment that we're in right now is a very difficult moment for them to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Stop seeing this physician, go find another physician. They're going to have to think about it. They're going to have to pray about it, meditate about it. They need to talk to some of the leaders in the world of healthcare who have advocated for health freedom and advocated for patients to be their own best champion. And I would suggest that patients talk to their chiropractors, talk to their nutritionists, talk to their health coaches, talk to their acupuncturists, because I think those are the groups of people who are highly educated, absolutely there for their patients, and have not been tainted by that arrogance and hubris of conventional Western AMA kind of medicine. Because when you talk to a chiropractor, they're going to make suggestions, and they're going to do things the way they've been doing them for decades. And that's as an advocate.
Right.
Chiropractors have never really enjoyed that position of absolute power and authority that physicians have in terms of being able to order this test, put a patient in the hospital, take care of the heart attack. So there's always been a little bit of an uneven balance there. What that's done is it's caused chiropractic profession to evolve in a direction that always considers the patient's perspective. And in my profession, as organized Western medicine, it's pushed us in the other direction. We're always right. We just tell the patient, this is what we think, so shut up and do it. And it's not working. We've seen it. It's been falling apart for the last couple of decades. And COVID-19 has put a bright, shining light on the dysfunctional relationship that's going on between the patient and the MD.
Yeah. And and it's interesting because people are watching this too. I've said this for years, not making me this all knowing, all right, but there's these categories of, in terms of, hey, don't come to me if you've got a broken bone. There's a lot of things you do not come to my office for, post all those things, and we can get into that road. It's just sad to me. It is really, really heartbreaking because, how do patients find doctors that are going to willingly advocate for their health and their choices, because it's been pumped down their throat that says, hey, you need another medication. You got the average American on, 12 to 14 different medications. We take more medications in the US than anybody else in the entire world. And just all these heartbreaking things. Where can they, because here's the fact, they need a medical doctor on their team. They need a chiropractor on their team. You need a healthcare team. But where do you find doctors that, and I sent you this text, what was it, maybe a month ago, I had a dear friend, and this individual was getting let go from their current physician because they were not vaccinated. And it was heartbreaking. And it was heartbreaking for me to send the text. You were very helpful in those things, but where can people look?
3 sources, Jeff. Let me start with a story. I did not ask my wife for permission to tell this story, so I'm out on a limb here. Many years ago, the veterinary clinic that my wife worked at, because my wife is an exceptional veterinarian who had a wonderful 40-year career doing surgery, taking care of cats and dogs, taking care of exotics, even dabbling in large animal practice during her early training years. She came home one day and she said, gee, I wonder if things are going to change at my job. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, well, the fellow who owns her clinic that she was working at, it wasn't her, the fellow who owns the clinic she was working at had decided to slow down a little bit and to sell the clinic. So he sold it to a nationally traded company that owns veterinary clinics. And the name of the company isn't really important. But what was important was my wife recognized the fact that things might change. What's really important is the rest of the story. Within a year, my wife's satisfaction with her job, with her ability to connect with her clients and patients, had dramatically changed. It wasn't the same. Her ability to walk in there and advocate for her client, take care of the pet, do the right thing, work within the confines of the patient's financial situation, all of the stuff that gets rolled into that kind of encounter between a health professional and a patient, that had changed. She ultimately ended up having to leave the clinic in order for her to pursue true professional happiness and satisfaction. And I was so darn proud of her because she went out, did the search, found a place, and had another 15, 20 years of wonderful practice before she retired. Why am I telling you that story? Because veterinarians are smart, well-trained, and have a lot of common sense. And they know the community. They know the community. So they're an excellent resource for you to ask. If you got your dog or cat being taken care of and you're looking at getting a different physician, don't hesitate. Ask the veterinarian. Just say, hey, do you have any suggestion for me? 2 other sources I would suggest beyond the veterinarian. I always tell people, if you're moving to an area, another state, oftentimes I know no doctors in that state. I tell them, try to connect with a nurse. Try to call the emergency room when it's quiet time in the emergency room, maybe like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and see if you can talk to a nurse and just tell the nurse that you're asking her or him for advice on who might be a good doctor to connect with. You're not trying to put them on the spot, but nurses know through the emergency room what kind of patients come through the doors. Are they well cared for? Do they feel connected? So nurses are an excellent resource. And then the last one, and I wouldn't hesitate, and I'm going to make a statement here that might be troublesome for some, but that's their problem, not mine. But talk to your pharmacist, especially talk to your pharmacist. If you have a pharmacist who is not in a big box pharmacy, I'm not going to name any names, but some of the pharmacists that are in these big box stores, they are so swamped. And oftentimes they are so regulated that they don't have the ability to really take a 3 or 5 minute conversation and share with a client who might be a good doctor. But if you're in a neighborhood pharmacy, or you have a pharmacist who knows you, that pharmacist will be able to give you good insight as to who might be a good doctor for you. Those would be the 3 resources I would use. Of course, you might, if you're leaving a doctor and the doctor's care on a friendly relationship because you're moving, oftentimes the doctor might have a suggestion as well. But in this pandemic time, what we're seeing is fractured, abruptly broken relationships. And I think those are the folks that you're asking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are 3 great resources. I would have never thought about the veterinarian one on that point.
If you were married to one, you might have.
I would have, yeah. All the way up until I was 16 years old and a horse landed on me. It was my first trip to the chiropractor. I was going to be a veterinarian, just in case anybody needs some Dr. Jeff Jeopardy at some point in their life. So yeah, that was a good one. All right. So we were trying to solve these problems for patients, right? Where do you go? What do you do? Very, very tactical things. And this is one of the things I always liked about you, Dr. Scott, is like, hey, no matter where you've been, because you've been, a senator, you've been a primary care physician, all the way back to Sleepy Eye, Minnesota. One thing I want to compliment you on just in the middle of this here is that you seemingly never lost your touch for the individual in terms of being able to relate. I've heard you speak many, many times, and will continue, I'm sure. But I just want to say, well done on you for remembering at the heart of, not the everyday Minnesotan, but the people that are out there right now that are working on their combine, getting it ready for the springtime, seed and planting time and all those things. Like you've always been able to draw it back and say, hey, this is relatable resources. These are relatable knowledge. It's never seemed condescending from you. So I appreciate that. Little curveball here. Why aren't we talking about natural immunity out there? What's the deal with that?
That's interesting that you asked that question, because a colleague, and actually one of my opponents, Dr. Neil Shah, for the Republican endorsement, he and I are on an email stream with a lot of physicians. And someone recently put a question out there, and Dr. Shah gave an answer that I thought was succinct and brilliant. So let me try to paraphrase what he said about natural immunity. And if I do it poorly, I apologize to Neil Shah. And if I do it acceptably, take the compliment, Dr. Shah, because he is a very bright man. But he said this: the reason you vaccinate is because you don't want to roll the dice with the natural disease. So if you've already had the natural disease and your immune system has developed and created this immune response, then you would have to ask yourself, why would you roll the dice with the vaccine? If you haven't encountered the disease and haven't been vaccinated, then you have to ask yourself, which way do I want to roll the dice? If you look at the calculations, and if you roll the dice to get the disease and take your chances, you'd want to know, what are your risks of significant disease or death? And those can relatively be calculated, particularly if you're over the age of 70 with multiple underlying conditions. If you get COVID-19, you probably have somewhere around a 5% chance of dying from it. But if you roll the dice with the vaccine, which has had more complications and deaths associated with it, according to the VAERS data, than all the vaccines combined over the last 30 years, which means that This is no small thing. The data needs to be looked at. But if you look at rolling the dice with the vaccine, and the data is that you have a 1 out of 25,000 chance of dying from it, then you would want to consider that. But if you've had the disease and you have immunity and you got it confirmed by an antibody test, why would you roll the dice when the side effect complication part of the vaccine side of the ledger is not completed yet? We know that we're still learning a lot literally every week, particularly for the young people. If you look at the number of unaccounted for deaths between 18 and 49, and they're not COVID deaths, we have to ask the question, what's going on out there? If we look at the number of high-performing athletes who have died within 7 days after receiving the vaccine, we have got to ask those questions. So I think the question really comes down to the idea that the public health officials thought they could willy-nilly throw natural immunity out the window is going to have far more destructive consequences than they might have realized. And one of the big consequences is going to be something that I'm already seeing in the office. That is exponentially increased hesitation to utilize the normally approved vaccine schedule for children and babies. Mm-hmm. I am seeing many parents say, I fully vaccinated my oldest child, my second child, but my third child here, I'm so leery of what I'm being told that I'm going to press pause, or I'm going to elongate the schedule, or I'll do this one and this one. I'm not going to do those two because those are live virus vaccines, and I just don't have the level of confidence I used to. We may well end up seeing more deaths in the pediatric population from childhood diseases, which had heretofore been vaccinated against by 97% of the population. And now, because we'll see a significant drop off in childhood vaccination utility because of COVID-19, there may be more deaths from standard childhood diseases that had been prevented. I hope it's not polio. I don't like the idea that we might literally give some of these diseases another chance to take a run at us.
Yeah, that's interesting. That may be a conversation again in the future with some of that, just with, there again, it seems like chiropractic has been a safe place for patients and a lot of times parents to bring up that question. And answering that as a father and answering that as a physician are two different scenarios. One, it's not in the scope of necessarily chiropractic, but per se, those natural routes. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. I think we chat about that again.
Let me answer the question, Jeff, not as a physician, because I just gave you my physician answer.
Yeah.
Let me answer that question, not as a father, because my children are vaccinated to the degree my wife and I chose to.
Sure.
Let me answer that question as a constitutional conservative. We have to have health freedom. If we don't, this is such a slippery slope that we're not simply talking about vaccines. Exactly. We're talking about government mandated treatment plans, whether we're talking about a mental illness, whether we're talking about how to treat a prostate cancer, a breast cancer, a colon cancer. Are we going to have the government say, well, your colon cancer is stage 3 and you're over the age of 70, but not over the age of 80. So this is the program you get. We saw a willingness to dabble at that in Minnesota within the last couple of weeks when we saw the Department of Health say that in regards to triaging who gets to use monoclonal antibody infusions, we're going to use some of the qualifiers as race. Now, isn't that an incredibly horrific thing to be talking about on Martin Luther King Day? I mean, Martin Luther King, who arguably encouraged all of us to try to become colorblind, to try to truly say, we are a land that is far better than that, who said, I have a dream. And when he spoke to his dream, he spoke of a place where color didn't matter, where our character, opportunity, these things matter. And yet we have the Department of Health saying, if you're white, you don't get a couple of points that might be critical in determining whether or not you're eligible for monoclonal antibodies. Now, the Department of Health has rescinded that policy decision, but the fact that it existed for a period of time is barbaric.
Yeah, I always get fired up because I think the Minnesota Department of Health, I think they should change their name, but that's a sidebar. I mean, at the end of the day, the thing I think we really need to measure healthcare against is results. You know, when it comes down to it, like in every game or a lot of things in life, there's a measurement and there's a scoreboard. You know, is what you're doing working? And the problem is so many people are afraid because they can't question their doctor. And finally now, and I've seen it over the last couple of years, people are coming out and questioning their doctors. They're questioning it, and not out of you're wrong and I'm right and all these things. But the fact of the matter is what we've been doing hasn't been working, and it's got to absolutely change. And that's kind of what I wanted into. So let's fast forward. I know we've got February coming up, and that's an important day for you. To get through to the next round. Let's say it goes favorably. Scott Jensen is the name on the Republican ticket for governor. Now we've got November coming up, which the elections, and let's just say that goes in our favor as well. And they say, okay, the next governor of the good state of Minnesota, all 10,000 plus lakes, is Scott Jensen. The first two things you're going to do, I'm curious, first two things you're going to do, and I'm going to throw in a bonus question, the first meal you and Mary are going to have to celebrate.
Well, I'll go with the second question first. The first meal Mary and I would have, where she says to me, let's have dinner together, just the two of us, what would we do? It would be the way my wife does salmon and asparagus and a Caesar salad. And then we would have 5 mint cookies at the end of the meal for our dessert. Now, okay, what would the first two things that we do be? Well, I've said over and over again that in the first 100 days, I would make a pact with Minnesotans that we would rewrite emergency powers. We would put photo ID in place for voting. We would have school choice. We would pass constitutional carry. And we would have standard ground legislation, those 5 things. And you're basically asking me to take that down to 2. So on the spot, I will say this. All 5 need to be done quick. But if I had to prioritize 2, I would say first, we must rewrite emergency powers. So never again do Minnesotans feel like they're being controlled by an emperor-like leader. And that should not be a difficult thing to do, because the governor going to the legislature saying, I want to relinquish some of the power that my office has, should be an acceptable thing for the legislature. So I would think we could get that done. And there are a variety of ways to do it. But we need to make it more and more difficult for a governor to be able to, if you will, claim and retain emergency powers. So clearly we have to have both bodies, the Senate and the House, vote to reaffirm, not to have to veto, because when you have divided government like we have in Minnesota, it's pretty darned obvious that Governor Walz is in no trouble, because the Democratic House is always going to be there to do his bidding, and they have been. So rewriting emergency powers is number 1. And number 2 is, if we don't have safe and secure elections, we've got huge problem. So I would say we have to have photo voter ID. But then we move into the other 3, and we do the hard work of creating a health freedom amendment. And we get school choice in there. And we make certain that never again do mama bears and papa bears have to fight over something as ridiculous as critical race theory. Jeff, you made a comment a few moments ago. You said that in terms of how does someone measure the performance, and you were referring to the Department of Health, but you said you're data driven, you're metric driven. That's what we have to be. We don't need to be in this election cycle. We don't need to be quibbling about conversations that were had 5 years ago about this issue or this issue. What we need to do is be laser focused on what is this candidate going to do? How are we going to measure his performance? I know that for me, I'm a different person today than I was 40 years ago when I graduated from med school. I know for me, I've learned every year. And I know that that one term in the Senate taught me a lot. It taught me how to get things done and how not to get things done. It taught me how to not stumble and bumble, which I did plenty of, but it also taught me how to measure my own performance. If we're going to measure the performance of the Department of Health, we should ask ourselves 3 questions. What's our neonatal mortality rate? Not good. We don't excel. What is our lifespan? Not good. We don't excel. What is the number of pills we take as a nation compared to other first world countries? Not good. We arguably consume 30, 40, 50% of the world's prescription drugs, even though we're only 5%, less than 5% of the world's population. That's the kind of experience that you'll see from me as governor. I will measure my performance based on metrics. And metrics means getting things done. As far as I'm concerned, Governor Walz should not have gotten a $52 billion budget last July. We should have drawn our line in the sand. Conservatives should have said, we are not going to have Jan Malcolm feeling like she's got job security. We're not going to have California car mandates holding us down. And we're going to have voter ID. And we're going to get rid of emergency powers. We got none of that. Not really. So those are things that I would do.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the core of it, absolutely crucial and critical, and especially like in that healthcare, because it's, you know, kind of some offline conversation we were having in the last well, obviously several months, but the last couple of years, like I've continued to feel like this just unsettled feeling. It's been building, and, you know, never have I thought in terms of Constitution and those different aspects, right? It was a class somewhere that we took back in high school, maybe college, but the fact of the matter remains. And I think one thing I feel very strongly connected to is like the blue collar, just good Midwest, hardworking, dedicated, you know, Minnesotan to their family, their faith, and their way of living. Like these are just like, this is the Midwest, you know, as you look at it. And it's like, where does that person, where do like, you know, as we engage into this and upcoming, and people are screaming, believe me, I mean, over my chiropractic tables, hundreds and hundreds of patients every week, and they are begging for something. They just want to know what direction to go in and what to point. They may not have the words, they might not have, you know, the platforms or all those things, but their heart is breaking for their children and their grandchildren. Like, what do you tell that person in terms of, hey, you know, you don't paint this, you know, everything's rosy rainbow future for them, but you say, hey, we got to break this down. What's a tactical thing that they can do right now?
Good question. And thanks, Jeff, for posing the question the way you did, because you're making it a broad enough question that it's really one of those hard, soul-searching kinds of challenges that virtually every one of us has right now within the context of what's gone on in America over 24 months. So Mary and I struggled with our decision because, honestly, in terms of people saying, has this been something you've always wanted to do, run for governor? I look them straight in the eye and I say, no. I said, in terms of my bucket list, I think Mary and I would have rather jumped out of an airplane to see if the parachute opened. But sometimes you have to just say, here we are. When we were recruited to run to be governor, I think part of the reason was because many people realized that I'm not looking for a new career path. I'm not a career politician. I really believe that the founding fathers had it right when they said we need to have citizen representatives going down and serving for a period of time, true service, and then stepping back into the community and do what they do. So Mary and I did this Daniel Bible study, 21 day. And on the last day, the 21st day, it says, see the door to your future. It doesn't say see your future. It says see the door. And I think that's sometimes a stumbling block for us. We think, well, I'm not exactly sure what I should be doing. Well, what we should be doing is we should see the door to our future. And that means you walk through that door, you don't get to know what's on the other side. If you walk through the door saying, I'm going to run for governor, you don't get to know if you're going to be successful or not. And then Mary and I go to the Bible a lot. And for us, I think there were 4 verses, and ironically, each one of them is chapter 4, verse 14. So if you want to look them up, it's chapter 4, verse 14 of 4 different books in the Bible. The first one was Esther. Have you considered you're in the position you're in for such a time as this. Mary and I felt that way. I think a lot of our listeners are probably feeling that way, Jeff. They're wondering, what am I supposed to do? Second one, you go to Philippians, and it says, Paul says to the church at Philippi, it is good of you to share my troubles. And I think that's where we're at. We have to share one another's troubles, one another's pain, one another's heartbreak. And we do that by some people stepping into the race, other people stepping into a support role. Then we go to Hebrews, where it says, 4:14, hold fast to the beliefs you profess. And that matters. And then we go to Ephesians. And in Ephesians, I believe, and I might have got this mixed up, but I think I have it right. But in Ephesians, it says, we do not have to be tossed about and thrown off our equilibrium by the scheming, crafty tricks and ploys of people. Those are the 4 verses. And again, I think I got it right. But I always think of Esther, Philippians, Hebrews, and Ephesians. And I always think of 4:14. And I think of how important it is that we hold fast to our beliefs and that we do share with one another in our troubles and trying to make things better. And that we not get tossed about by the winds of deceit and cunning. And then I think all of us are in these uncomfortable spots for such a time as this. And I think if those words would help your audience come to grips, I think every one of your members of your audience need to get involved. But honestly, Jeff, one of the reasons I enjoy talking with you is because I have a challenge for you. You would ask me offline, what kinds of roles might Jeff May play? I'll tell you what role you can play. You're a member of a profession that's been absolutely committed from the day you graduated from chiropractic school to championing your patients' health and encouraging and empowering them to do so. And you've always been there when it comes to health freedom. I'm going to guess that you're not arbitrary, that you don't tell patients, don't do this, but do this and do this. I need your profession leading the way for me. I need you to somehow contact every chiropractor in Minnesota and telling them they need to watch this video. They need to seriously think about going to caucus on February 1st because it's at 7:00 across the state, Democrats and Republicans alike. But I am not going to be the darling choice, Jeff, of the political establishment. I'm not kissing the ring. I'm not a puppet on a string. We haven't taken one dime from big pharma, not one dime from big tech. We've had no fundraisers with lobbyists. We're saying this has got to be a groundswell movement of we the people, or it's nothing at all. This has got to be we the people as a groundswell. And there are very few influencers as powerful as the chiropractic profession, because the folks that you deal with every day, they trust you because they know you are their advocate. So if you can touch every one of the chiropractors and encourage every one of your chiropractic colleagues to touch 5 other people, we're really cooking with real gas now. We're going to get a pretty hot fire going, Jeff.
Well, I'll tell you what, if there's anything I can do, it's we have a lot of chiropractors that reach out each and every week, and especially after building the new health center, asking how you're doing this and how you're doing that. I'll make sure it gets out there, and we'll share it to the chiropractors because, like any profession, there's good, bad, and there's ugly. I'll tell you, one of the best things about the profession that I get to be a part of is that in, the over 120 some year history of chiropractic, it has always been an uphill battle in terms of, they're always like, well, you're the stepchild of the healthcare industry and all those different things. But the fact of the matter remains, we all play a role, and that we have been continuing to have the heart that at the end of the day, our patients are heard and they're helped. And that's all we can ask for in the healthcare profession. That's one of the things that resonate with you. So I appreciate it, Dr. Scott. This was good. I think we're gonna wrap it there. We're gonna put a bow on it. February 1st. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that you didn't ask this question, but I know it's on the hearts and minds of so many people. And I apologize for interrupting, Jeff, but I would like to leave all of your patients and all of my patients and our audience with one thought in regards to COVID-19. I really do believe there is strong evidence that in terms of what you can do to make your immune system better, you need to seriously think about vitamin C and vitamin D, zinc, and quercetin, quercetin, 500 milligrams a day. Those 4 things are all over the counter and they're readily available to you. And the more I learn about this, the more I think that combination can be really helpful. And I would combine that with at least a 10-minute walk every day. If you're overweight, lose 5 pounds. Meditate and pray every day so your mind is at peace. Because we have to do both the physical and the mental side of our physiology in order to really maximize the strength of our immune system. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't leave that out, Jeff, because I get asked.
We're going to make sure we're going to cut and edit that and paste it everywhere. I think all of America has been begging for somebody with a platform to actually say, hey, what can you do to build your immune system? Even though some of us chiropractors feel like we've been shouting it from the rooftops for a while. So yes, we will wash, rinse, and repeat that for sure. So I appreciate it. I know you've got a school board talk tonight to District 112. And so there's a lot of, my fellow parents and my student wife, I got a child in that school district. So appreciate you going over there in the relentless road. And I know Mary's listening in the background. So I appreciate you, Mary, letting me borrow your husband for a minute or two here this afternoon to continue to give Minnesotans hope for a brighter future. So,
well, here she is.
Yes, there it is.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Mary. I appreciate you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
You're
All
welcome.
right, you guys, this is Doctor's Orders with Jeff C. Main, featuring the future governor of Minnesota, Scott Jensen.